The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut. Open 7 days and nights a week with a variety of terrain for skiers and snowboarders of all abilities. Hours at skisundown.com. Winter made better. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by UMass Amherst School of Public Policy. Admissions now open for graduate programs in 2025. Learn how to become a changemaker at umass.edu/SPP.
Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, we'll check out the artistic mobilizing force behind hashtag Food Bank influencer Christina Wong, who'll perform her one-woman show at Bowker Auditorium tomorrow night.
And we'll wax poetic about the legacy of David Lynch with creative director Ben Elliott of Triplex Cinemas while exploring the films they'll show as part of the series Time to Sleep.
But first, to the nation's capital,
where the representative for the 2nd District is tackling a lot.
Well, first off, Congressman, it's pretty awesome that the biggest debate you had on your Twitter this week had to do with Broadway and the governor's ball and Les Mis. Yeah. You believed it to be an active protest at the governor's ball and they protested you at your own event and you were too stupid to get it. But then the myriad comments about the actual nature of what Les Mis is all about versus what you were posting about was a delight to watch.
I stand by my comments.
Time for our weekly check-in with U.S. Congressman from the 2nd Congressional District of Massachusetts and the ranking member of the Rules Committee, which we'll get to in a little bit with a very interesting listener question. And again, we have been bombarded with listener questions for you this week, Congressman. But before we launch into that, let's do a quick rundown of some of the other things that have gone on with you this week. We know you had over 500 people in Northampton for coffee with the Congressman, even more in Worcester. Worcester, a little more purple, if not reddening, as a district. Were there Trump supporters there? And if so, did they have any comments that you felt were valid that you could address as a Democratic and very progressive congressman?
I mean, I had a couple of people who basically said that they voted for him because they didn't like Kamala or they, wanted to get more focus on, everyday bread and butter issues, but they did not vote for him for all of this. I think there were some people that chose not to get up and express their views. I mean, because it was quite a turnout, and we had an overflow room as well. And I stayed there for 3.5 hours. But something's happening, and the intensity of people's feelings is different than previous years. And people are concerned about cuts in various programs that directly impact their lives. But a lot of people are very, very concerned about our democracy, about the Constitution. And as a history major, in college, I actually found that refreshing and hopeful that people are see what's happening and they see kind of our constitutional government kind of being torn apart by Donald Trump, and they want to fight back.
Your next coffee with the Congressman is this Saturday, I believe, in Leominster. So another opportunity for an in-person conversation with Congressman Jim McGovern. There was a protest of sorts, an action in front of your office in Northampton about the change in sides for the U.S. in response to what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Did you have a chance to talk with any of those folks?
I didn't, but and I certainly respect a lot of the people that showed up. Look, my view is I don't like wars, and I try to find ways to avoid them and try to find ways to end them. But the best way to end this war in Ukraine is for Russia and Vladimir Putin to leave. And it really bothers me that we have a president who is saying that Ukraine was responsible for this war and not Putin and Russia. That's just a lie. The war that Putin has waged against the Ukrainians has been particularly vicious. I was there shortly after the war started. They're deliberately targeting, civilian apartment buildings and medical facilities and schools. I mean, this is a bad guy. And for us to basically kind of say that Zelensky's a dictator, but Putin is not. I mean, Zelensky was duly elected by the people of Ukraine. Does anyone believe that there were free and fair elections in Russia? So. Yeah, let's figure out ways to end it, but let's figure out ways to end it that doesn't give the advantage to Vladimir Putin, because this won't be the end of it.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, earlier this week, we spoke with Foxtrot Farm in Ashfield, and there's been news stories from other farms like They Keep Bees in Montague about the DOGE cuts to contracts that these local farmers were already relying on, planning for this next growing season or the next few growing seasons to have in their accounts, which are now all of a sudden totally stopped. Meanwhile, there's been cuts at the USDA. A listener question from Ed Maltby saying, with the staff cuts at the USDA, what can be be done to ensure adequate resources to effectively manage the National Organic Program, stop organic fraud, and maintain organic integrity that small to mid-size organic farmers rely on?
Let's first be clear about one thing, and that is I think some of these cutbacks are illegal, and there's litigation being filed. Secondly, I don't think Donald Trump or this administration care about organics or care about small or medium-sized farms. So we have to worry about integrity of some of these programs. Three, I don't know where the budget cuts are going to come. The House just passed a budget that Trump wanted that calls for deep cuts in USDA. We don't know where that's going to be. We're going to fight like hell to make sure that our beekeepers and our small and medium-sized farms and our organic farmers and all the farms that are unique to Massachusetts and New England are protected. I mean, I think we need a farm bill that actually understands that not all farms are big mega corporate farms, and we're going to fight like hell to try to make sure that what is important and necessary for farmers here in New England is protected. But this is a battle. This is a fight, and it's not even going to be about the integrity of programs. It's whether or not even programs will exist.
On the GOP passed House budget, you said on the floor, or at least on social media, Democrats offered an amendment to protect Medicaid. Every Republican voted no. Democrats offered an amendment to extend tax cuts for people making under $400,000 while ensuring that corporations and billionaires pay their fair share. Every Republican voted no. Democrats offered an amendment preventing tax giveaways for people earning over $1 million a year. Every Republican voted no. It goes on and on like this. One of our listeners, JJ White, says, I'm a regular listener to your show, and I enjoy hearing Congressman McGovern's updates about the, as JJ says, lunacy taking place in the federal government. It's well known that high-income tax states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Jersey send our tax dollars to support red states with healthcare, education, and other expenditures. JJ wants to know, why are my tax dollars going to states that are hostile to trans people, where teaching about racism is banned, where women have lost the freedom to make their own healthcare decisions, and how can we stop it and keep our local tax dollars working for us? He adds, P.S. I'll be asking the congressman if he knows the history of the Velvet Divorce and its relevancy to this moment in America. Velvet Divorce, my new band name, but also has to do with the dissolution of Czechoslovakia. As a history major, I'm sure you know something about that.
Yeah.
What's your take on JJ's question about blue states supporting red states while red state congresspeople seem to vote against those interests?
Yeah, no, it is frustrating. I appreciated the Governor Maine's retort to Trump when he threatened to cut off all federal aid to Maine because they're not complying with his DEI executive orders and jumping up and down in enthusiasm over his anti-immigrant executive orders. So you cut our aid, and we're not going to send any federal tax dollars to Washington. Look, I think it's complicated, but I appreciate the question and the sentiment. There's no easy way to kind of fix that, but if things get really out of control, we're going to have to find creative ways to resist and to not cooperate. But it's not so easy to be able to separate those dollars because sometimes it's automatically taken out of your checks. And the other thing is there'll be a legal consequence too. But I appreciate the question, and I'm trying to think of ways to be able to register our protest and to make it clear that we're not going to continue to support and subsidize policies that we deplore.
Speaking with U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern, speaking of creative uses of the current way the government works and the Constitution as it did stand, or perhaps still does, Chris from Greenfield sent 8 questions, but I was like, you got to narrow this down, but maybe I'll ask a couple more over the course of the next couple weeks. His priority question for you was an interesting take that I had not heard before. He says, our representative is the ranking member of the Rules Committee, so this one relies on some convoluted rules, the background of which he would love you to correct him on if he's wrong. He says, under the House rules, any member can ask for a privileged resolution, which requires a vote from the House in response to any declaration of emergency by the executive branch. Trump has declared such an emergency in order to impose sanctions on Mexico, Canada, China. The proposal that he has is that you, because of your deep knowledge of the House rules, are in a good position to bring forth a privileged resolution requiring all House members to have an up or down vote on these tariffs, putting representatives on the line as either supporting, sometimes as we mentioned before, to the detriment of their constituents, or voting against the Trump initiatives and therefore endangering Trump's future support of their reelection. Are you considering a privileged resolution about these tariffs? And if not, why not?
No, we are, and we are working with the committees of relevance. We have to make sure that the parliamentarians actually decide that what we're doing is indeed privileged, and there are ways for the majority to try to get around some of this stuff. But we're looking at all kinds of procedural motions to be able to kind of bring some of these issues to light. I think that the other thing is we got to make sure we can win on some of this stuff, because we don't want to strengthen Trump's hand on some of these policies that, quite frankly, I think are counterproductive. But we are looking at a whole range of things, and so stay tuned. We're having discussions about that as we speak. I think the tariffs have against Canada and Mexico, I think technically they haven't gone into effect yet. I think is it in a week or so? So we're looking at all this stuff.
Last listener question for this week. Carolyn Asbury wants to know, is the House ready to stand up against the coup, as Angus King is imploring the senators to do? Again, Carolyn Asbury's words. Now that Trump and company have fired the Joint Chiefs, Inspector Generals throughout the government, and the JAGs, has Congress had enough? Do they see the writing on the wall? The House has constitutional recourse against an unlawful president. Their inaction looks to me like the majority welcome the tech oligarchy, that they're ready for a new type of government in the U.S. Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, thinks many GOP Congress people want an authoritarian government, that this is what they want. Is anyone talking about impeachment or their vow to uphold the Constitution? She wants to know, what do you think about Congress's inaction, and what more are you waiting for? I'll also just personally add that The Onion had a great headline that said, Democrats are standing still so that hopefully no one will notice they're there.
I don't buy that. I mean, I think there's a lot. People are very, very concerned. The reality is that elections, have consequences, and we've said this before. I mean, one of the problems of not, having one of the chambers is that the Republicans get to control the floor schedules. They get to control hearings. They get to control what bills come to the floor. So yeah, I mean, I think he's behaving unlawfully, and I think impeachment is a tool that's available to us to stop it. But I got to figure out a way to get impeachment to the floor, and so that's kind of the problem we're up against right now. Now maybe things get so bad that we get Republicans, finally, enough of them cave that we can actually bring something to the floor. But in the House of Representatives, I mean, the majority has some really strong powers to control what comes to the floor and what doesn't. And so, this majority has proven spineless. They are afraid of Donald Trump, and they are afraid of Elon Musk. They are afraid of primary challenges because, quite frankly, that's where Trump's support is the strongest amongst Republican primary voters. And he has made it clear, and Elon Musk has made it clear, that he's only too happy to write out millions and millions and millions of dollars of checks to help a primary opponent. Musk gave Trump something like $280 million for his campaign. I've talked about the need to start thinking about when we get to a point where it is, clear to everybody that this guy is trying to become an authoritarian, or a fascist leader, that we have to be thinking in terms of things like, a national strike. And we have to organize for that now. I mean, in Europe, there's examples where that has actually changed the trajectory of a country. In Poland, during the Solidarity movement, they did that. They literally stopped the country. And the other thing that people need to be focused on is, while all this is happening, I mean, Elon Musk is basically stealing your money and enriching himself. I mean, his entire empire is built upon billions and billions of dollars in government funds. This is the guy who's shutting down, agencies that are doing oversight of his business dealings, and he is benefiting from U.S. tax dollar funds. And again, if we had we're going to be doing shadow hearings, but one of them will be on the conflicts of interest and the blatant corruption coming out of this White House, and specifically Elon Musk's corruption.
U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern joins us every week answering questions from our listeners. I've said that I'm going to ask you this as the final question going forward here. What's something that's giving you hope this week, Congressman?
You know what? We came close to defeating this budget. If we had another Republican that had voted with us, we could have stopped it. And we had Democrats show up, including Two Democrats, one, Representative Pedersen, who just had a baby. She flew across the country to be there to cast a vote against this budget.
Because she was not allowed to vote remotely, despite the fact that other people have done that in the past.
Yeah, the Speaker says that he won't let anyone vote remotely. Yet we've had a Republican who voted remotely when he was doing the Bill Maher show. So I don't understand so talk about hypocrisy. And then another one, Representative Mullen, flew from California. He had surgery on his leg. He had a terrible infection. He was in the hospital, and he and his wife flew from California to Washington to cast a vote against this disastrous budget, and she changed his IV on the airplane.
Oh, my word.
But they showed up, and so I want people to know that we have Democrats that are fighting like hell. Representative Pedersen just had a baby, and Representative Mullen, was in a terrible condition. Literally just left the hospital and went to the airport because they know what's at stake. So we have to fight back. We have to fight back harder, and we need to know that if we could have just turned one or two more Republicans, we could have stopped this. We have a couple of bills coming up: the budget reconciliation bill and the government funding bill. There may be some opportunities again to put the brakes on some of this disastrous policy. But I was inspired by both of them. They love this country, and they did what they had to do to be here to cast a no vote.
U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern will be having another coffee with Jim on Saturday at 9:30 in Leominster at Leominster City Hall. These have been jam-packed with folks that are concerned about where we're going, or maybe folks that are thrilled about where things are going and want to make their voices heard to our congressman. Congressman McGovern joins us every Thursday for McGoverning with McGovern. If you've got a question for the congressman, like so many people did this week, you can send it our way, thefab413@nepm.org. Thanks as always, Congressman.
Thanks a lot, and keep the faith. All the best.
Up next, we'll head to Amherst to meet the woman behind a week-long residency at UMass that'll culminate in a solo show at Bowker Auditorium that looks at our nation's food insecurity issues, Christina Wong.
And we'll also relive the importance of David Lynch's films on the industry with a film series at the Triplex Cinema and tell you more about the series Time to Sleep.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. This Friday, February 28th at 8 p.m. at Bowker Auditorium at UMass, the Asian and Asian American Arts and Culture program at UMass Amherst presents Christina Wong, #Food Bank Influencer.
Performance artist, comedian, actor, and writer Christina Wong is a real-life food bank influencer in Los Angeles. She brings glamour and pizzazz to the emergency food system like nobody asked her for. Her avant premiere of this new work takes us through America's food insecurity issues from big cities to the Navajo Nation. Wong will help us to look at the future of food access. If food banks were originally a stopgap for a temporary crisis and now have become a permanent part of American survival, does this mean we are in a perpetual state of crisis?
Yes.
Well, we'll find out what Christina has to say in just a minute.
Christina Wong is a Doris Duke Artist Award winner, a Guggenheim Fellow, and a Pulitzer Prize finalist in drama. She has performed on stages across North America, the United Kingdom, Hong Kong, and Africa. She's been a guest on late-night shows on NBC, Comedy Central, and FX. Her commentaries have appeared on American Public Media, Vice, Jezebel, Playgirl Magazine, The Huffington Post, CNN, and PBS. Who are they?
PBS. We love them.
And Christina joins us now. Thank you for joining us, Christina.
My bio reads like a cultural funeral. Oh, no.
It's your New York Times obituary that I'll get a push notification about when you finally shuffle off your mortal coil. Christina, this is a fun and fascinating sounding show, and I've watched some of your videos from your food bank in Los Angeles, but tell us about your first encounter with your local food bank in LA. What brought you there in the first place to become a food bank influencer?
Sure. After 20 years of just trying to find a little bit of help with groceries and feeling like I'm not really feeling the emergency of the emergency food thing, and I feel like any other sort of emergency food source I turn to, Sarah McLachlan will always be playing in the background. I will remember you. Gotta be like a better way around it. And I just happened to wander in to World Harvest Food Bank in Los Angeles on Arlington and Venice. It looks like a store, and basically their very atypical model is you can shop for their groceries, you can volunteer there and get a heaping cart of really good stuff. And I had no idea it was a food bank. And I couldn't stop talking about this place, about how much waste they were rescuing and diverting to their clients and customers, to the point that I had no personality anymore. more. I just was like, I cannot stop telling you about this place that makes me rethink generosity, access, what's possible, what a de-shamed mean experience around food banks looks like, and blurted out that my next show was going to be about being a food bank influencer. And here we are 3 years later on the stage at Bowker Auditorium singing, doing this one-person musical that it's basically about emergency food systems.
And I know that you've adapted some music that people know about, like Guns N' Roses and etc. So are your Weird Al Yankovic style changing the lyrics to our favorite?
Yes, very, very much, but a little bit more sexy. You know what I'm saying?
Hey.
I know the radio audience can't see it right now, but listen, I keep you going at night. You know what I'm saying? Like just like in your fantasies, when you're like both fantasizing about food and the influencer to sell it to you. That's me. So nobody asked me to do this, but I got really deep into learning about emergency food systems, the history of, did you know that we had more food banks show up in this country during Reagan's presidency?
I wonder why.
So we're going to look at that. We'll understand why food banks had to show up to supplement what free food is available through the federal government, and also understand these sort of strange inverted systems of corporations vowing to end hunger, yet a lot of their own employees being on food stamps. So there's a lot I've uncovered in what started as, wow, I love this place, to, oh my God, the system.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's fun. I'm a Pulitzer Prize finalist for a reason, not for this particular show.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not to talk about process instead of the cause, because we're definitely going to get back to the cause.
Yeah.
But like, how does this show compare to Sweatshop Overlord? Like, it seems like there's missions behind a lot of your work.
Sure. I mean, a lot of these shows start with me naively saying, I'm going to fix this thing. It'll be really easy. So Sweatshop Overlord, my last solo show, was March 2020 hit. I was suddenly an unessential worker because I'm a solo performer. But I sew my set pieces, and I saw there was a need for home sewn masks. And I very naively made an offer of what I thought would be a stopgap until the government or whatever would step in and give masks away. I offered to sew masks for people who needed it. Turns out that was everybody. And I had no idea that wearing masks would become so politicized. I had no idea that we would be going for over 500 days. So I started a group called the Auntie Sewing Squad to help. And I did not realize that the Auntie Sewing Squad's acronym was... Yeah. I don't even know if it's 7 dirty words, but I really got interested in thinking about mutual aid versus what traditional charities can accomplish. And it was weird. We were actually faster and more reliable than government support or nonprofits that would have to check in with their board. And we could get to it somehow faster than a lot of these sort of established systems in place. And so during that time I began to get to know my food bank better because they were part of our ecosystem of care. And so I sort of just went into this thinking this would be just a quickie fast, I love this place celebration of food banks. But the more research I did, the more I began to uncover about sort of these complicated systems that have failed us. And now we've become a world of life rafts or Band-Aids, right? And while, emergency food is always very necessary, we've gone from the emergency becoming hurricanes and wildfires to being day-to-day working class survival.
We're speaking with Christina Wong, whose one-woman show, #FoodBankInfluencer, will be at the Bowker Auditorium at UMass Friday at 8 p.m. You're from L.A. Your food bank that you have a relationship with is in L.A. We have done a lot of work on this show with our local food bank of Western Mass, which is more like a literal bank where they're housing all this stuff and then advocating for food justice issues, while your food bank seems more like the food pantries that are in our area. And I know you're going to be in conversation with Amherst Survival Center and,
Yes.
Grow Food Northampton and some of those folks. But one thing that's really interesting about where you live in L.A. is the impact that the SAG-WGA strike had on the local food bank. And you as a performer then advocating for, hey, check this out. We've got this amazing resource here in L.A.
Yeah. So Glenn, by the way, would be really offended that you referred to his food bank as a pantry.
Maybe it's a West Coast, East Coast thing?
It's more of a like how it runs is how our food pantries run.
Yeah,
They also do food giveaways at other sites the way a food bank would.
Our food bank, though, you'll figure this out if nobody's told you yet, but our food bank, you don't go there to get food.
Yeah,
they send their food out to 200 other places.
I have a fun song that distinguishes the difference, and a fun moment where actually someone tells me that World Harvest is a pantry, and it's like, oh, excuse you. But yeah, so during the strike, because of their atypical model, they were able to be quite flexible. When I saw there was this double strike happening of both WGA writers and SAG union actors, it was very clear that people were going to lose their homes, and people still have lost their homes or couch surfing, moved back in with family members. I mean, we think that Hollywood is super glamorous. It is actually not. Most of union members are not working all the time. So Glenn offered for folks on strike, whether WGA or SAG-AFTRA, if you showed your union card, he would give you a cart of groceries, no question asked, not realizing we had 130,000 SAG members and like 30,000 WGA members. And it was really eye-opening. People were showing up in tears. For some of them, it was their first time using a food bank. A lot of them were very scared. They had like eked careers out, and suddenly everything was on hold. And a lot of what we were dealing was the backlash of people who didn't believe that actors and writers could possibly be food insecure. I think they had a different image in their head. But the truth is that the picture of food insecurity is much wider than we realize. And so that was really a moment where we had to figure out how to both teach others, like, it's okay that actors get food. We know everyone hates actors, but listen, they do need to eat. And this food insecurity thing is real. And to constantly have to prove that you're deserving, part of the reason why there's such a skewed idea around what food insecurity really looks like.
We're speaking with a food bank influencer, Christina Wong, whose performance, #FoodBankInfluencer, will be at the Bowker Auditorium at UMass Friday night. What are some of the things that you've learned about food insecurity through creating this that you think are important for people to know about? Some of the statistics about who's relying on food banks, how many people, why people are going to food banks, that kind of thing.
1 in 6 Americans use food banks. 47 million rely on SNAP or EBT benefits, otherwise known as food stamps. There's like quite a lot of food insecurity in the richest country in the world. I think it's interesting that in our Constitution, you can have a gun, but we are not guaranteed access to adequate food. We have a USDA, which in theory produces enough food. 40% of the food produced in this country ends up in a landfill before it even makes it to the table. That's huge.
Yeah.
Student hunger is also huge, and that's a part of the show. The percentage, at least in California, of homeless four-year college students is around 14% of students, and I'm one of them. At one point, I could not find affordable housing when I was in college. I was surfing on couches and was food insecure. But my pride would not, let you all know this, except now I have to do a show about it. And so I've come out. We need to both shift our image of what this looks like, de-shame what it means to accept emergency food, but also kind of rethink what are these root issues that have created a situation. And maybe there's something else besides constantly throwing food at hunger to help us make it go away, because we've been throwing food at hunger for decades, and it's only getting worse. So, could it be systemic?
We had our U.S. Congressman Jim McGovern on the show today, and Congressman McGovern is one of the loudest voices in the House of Representatives about fighting food insecurity, and he and many others will tell you something like the child tax credit that was available during the pandemic cut childhood food insecurity in half with like a magic wand. There are real fixes. We almost did it in the 1970s, as Christina Wong mentioned. Food banks all across the country popped up for some reason in the 1980s and have been the go-to place for so many people who are food insecure since then.
Something imposed systemic oppression. I'm curious about network-wise for food banks where you are. Here there is a certain connection between like the small local farms and the food banks. And I know that there are larger farms in California than there is here, but is there still that connection between like local agriculture and frankly like small farms that kind of themselves may be struggling, kind of themselves might find themselves at food banks?
I'm not an expert on the relationship of different farms. I've done a lot of visits around the country, so I have seen programs like gleaning from backyards, but I know it's very particular region to region. And because I'm in a big city like Los Angeles, we just have a lot of food waste. So a lot of it will end up at the food bank, and it's everything that was sealed up giant fishes that were already marinated, headed to restaurants that didn't make it to the restaurant or came in underweight at a factory. So there's a lot of stuff, but I definitely feel like different food banks reflect the dynamics of farming in their area.
Do you think that in addition to reframing what we think hunger looks like, maybe we should also reframe what we think waste is too?
Yes, absolutely. I think we there's a whole song called "Expiration Dates Are Lies," which is very similar to the song "Hit Me, Baby, One More Time." Yeah, I used to think I was bad at food because even my processed food that I would keep, oh no, that it's been a week past this date. I guess my face is going to explode if I eat this. And as it turns out, a lot of it is just to move food through the factory to just, it's good to get a reference of like when it was made, but a lot of canned food will last way longer than whatever the best by date is on the can. And as I say this, I'll probably get sued by people who claim to
Yeah, they're going to get food poisoning. Christina
from
Wong told me to eat
Christina
it.
Wong, food bank influencer.
Yeah, it's more of a best practices thing than like a hard,
it's a suggestion.
hard rule.
Maybe for milk, go with
Yeah.
it. Other than
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Other
and
than
it
that.
smells terrible,
Yeah.
and it was like a wilty salad. Yeah, maybe not.
Christina, this is your avant premiere, as opposed to in
Yes.
April when your culminating premiere will happen. Tell us why you brought it to the East Coast and your relationship with the UMass Amherst, the Bowker Auditorium, where this will have its avant premiere on Friday night.
In the last 20 plus years of making solo shows, I've played the Bowker.
Nice.
I was presented by different Asian affinity student groups on campus. I have worked a lot throughout my career on this campus, and Michael Sakamoto, who's the programmer, just really was excited about this because student hunger is a real issue, and they've been trying to get the campus to think about all this food waste and how can it go towards graduate students who are both trying to teach, learn, get their degrees, get them to eat. How can we donate swipes? Student meal swipes is a real thing.
Oh,
that
yeah.
was a thing back when I was a student too.
Yep.
It was like bumming swipes off people.
Yep.
And there's a whole song, Meal Plan Daddy, set to Hey Big Spender. So so yeah, it's real, and a lot of campuses have been interested in this. And student food pantries is a fairly new phenomenon. It didn't exist in the 90s when I was a student, but it went from 80 student food pantries 10 years ago to now over 800 across the country.
Which is both good and terrible at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a lot of campuses, I cannot say who, they don't officially have the pantries as part of their campus. It's like students who have to organize and put it slightly off site because it's kind of embarrassing, I guess, for them. It's like, what do you think about your students who
Right.
are in such financial straits that they have to rely on them?
There are a lot of important messages in the themes of your work. What makes theater such a good medium for these messages and for these lessons that you've learned?
I feel like theater is the original OG technology that brings us face to face, that you get to sit with me for slightly over an hour, look me in the eye, and experience this human narrative where you don't cancel me right away because you both see me fail out loud, but also learn out loud with you and think out loud. And we keep trying to do this AI and this VR stuff, but really we have this incredible technology called theater where it's like, wow, that performer is not taking a break. That performer is not edited up there. They've memorized all those lines. They're looking me in the eyes. Wow, now I'm singing with them. Like that's what makes this so incredible. Is it is this moment of community that will only exist during that show, where we're all together and feeling closer and sharing and laughing together. It's something that I think we keep trying to recapture with more technology, but we already have it.
You've won many accolades. How do those awards affect the work that you're able to do after winning the awards?
Well, thank you for acknowledging Pulitzer Prize finalists. Man, when they called me and told me I was a Pulitzer finalist, it was like a whole lifetime of therapy transpired. Suddenly I'm emotionally perfect, everybody. I'm emotionally perfect. All my problems are gone. I have enough validation to proceed in the world. Don't date losers anymore. You know what I'm saying? So, but no, it's really validating, and it's kind of gotten my parents off my back, which is great. So that's all you have to do, folks. Become a Pulitzer finalist, or better, Pulitzer winner, and everything will come to you. No, but it's still challenging, and I'm still thinking through all these ideas and learning as I try to put it on paper. And I think it's been expressed to me that some people think that I have it made. Listen, I didn't win it. I was just a finalist, but that like suddenly I might be too too unrelatable to be talking about hunger and stuff like that. But no, all that stuff is still real. I'm still trying to figure out how to pay bills, and I'm getting married this year for health insurance. It's like, and love.
Okay,
but
good.
like, I'm really excited about the health insurance, right? So like, no, it's yes. So while it's a boost up, life is still very real and still worth reporting on and making shows about.
It sounds like an incredible show. It's this Friday, February 28th, 8 p.m., Bowker Auditorium at UMass, talking about important issues in a very funny way as a hashtag food bank influencer. It's an issue that we care very deeply about on this show. We talk about our food bank all the time.
You walk 43 miles for yours.
There might be people that would say I'm a little bit of a local food bank influencer myself, but this is all about you, Christina Wong, Pulitzer Prize finalist. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Guggenheim Award winner.
Guggenheim Award fellow. There you go. And it's happening again at 8 p.m. at Bowker Auditorium Friday night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll see you Friday.
And of course, the Fine Arts Center is an underwriter of NEPM, but if they bring cool people to town, we're going to talk to them regardless of that.
Thanks so much to Christina Wong for talking with us.
She's a riot.
Now to explore the contributions of auteur David Lynch at the Triplex in Great Barrington as creative director Ben Elliott tells us more about the Time to Sleep series.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Window World of Western Mass, a local family-owned and operated complete exterior remodeling business offering windows, siding, gutters, and more. windowworldofwesternma.com.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. The legendary American director, writer, actor, musician, and visual artist David Lynch died, and the Triplex Cinema in Great Barrington, that nonprofit cinema, is presenting a special series to honor this cinema giant, David Lynch, in a series called Time to Wake Up.
The series will run through April and will continue with Eraserhead on March 1st. Ben Elliott, creative director at the Triplex Cinemas in Great Barrington, joins us now. Thanks for joining us to talk more about Lynch.
Always a pleasure to be here and talk about one of my favorite directors.
We can keep sticking it to our director over and over again, who, after Lynch died, I came in the middle of a Zoom call with him where he was saying negative things about Dune and David Lynch being overrated.
Okay.
And it ruined my whole day.
First of all, Dune's your ammunition there.
And this is original Dune with Kyle MacLachlan. This is not the Denis Villeneuve.
It's not part of our series, but I'll gladly discuss that with you.
And frankly, for anybody coming in who doesn't want to get into the nitty-gritty of all of Hebert's nonsense, it is space colonialism.
Hebert, the author of Dune, yes.
Lynch's Dune is the best way to get the most information for your buck as quickly as possible in the Dune universe, period.
And it's a cautionary tale because David Lynch did not have final cut on Dune, so it is not the movie David Lynch wanted to make, and I keep that with me very close as somebody who does a lot of editing. Never give up final cut.
I sold out. So it was a slow dying the death and a terrible, terrible experience.
David Lynch also had a very iconic sounding voice. I actually I taught my son how to drive stick in what I called David Lynch driving school. So I'd be like, you need to let the clutch out a little bit slower. And because it was so intimidating for him to learn how to drive stick that I knew the somehow shouting strange voice of David Lynch was going to make things easier.
One thing that I went to after learning about his passing was rewatching his cameo in The Fabelmans.
Oh, yes.
As John Ford. As one of the last things that he did on. So, I mean, the times that he acted, he was playing not too far from himself.
Right.
But he was such a brilliant fit for John Ford. And I've heard Spielberg tell that story before, in the past, at Tanglewood, he's mentioned. So seeing it brought to life with David Lynch is, I love it for a lot of reasons. Fantastic.
So if you think David Lynch is overrated, Steven Spielberg cast David Lynch as his most inspirational director in the biopic about himself. Okay?
When the horizon's at the bottom, it's interesting. When the horizon's at the top, it's interesting. When the horizon's in the middle, it's boring as shit. Now, good luck to you. And get the out of my office.
Yeah.
There you go.
Let's talk about the David Lynch weather reports, shall we?
This afternoon, it'll be going up to only 55 degrees Fahrenheit. That's around 13 Celsius.
No, but again, there's a million ways we could talk about David Lynch, but let's keep it to the series. March 1st, Eraserhead, David Lynch's first big picture out of the gate.
Yeah.
Not the movie that you started the series with, which was Wild at Heart, but talk about, you had several other movies you could have chosen from.
Well, it's so funny. It's a kind of we were just talking about Dune, and it started his career, right? Like this was his first feature, a truly independent movie, right? Like he got funding from AFI, he just got his friends to pitch it. It's a movie that definitely hits different to me now that I'm a parent than the first time I watched it.
Yes.
A lot of the themes that I think throughout this series are in this first film, right? It's anxiety about the world, about sexuality, but parenthood is really kind of at the forefront of this one. That it's such an interesting place to kind of start in his career. It's one of the ones that I'm most excited to see in the theater for the sound mix alone. The score and the sound of this are just this kind of like industrial nightmare, and I'm saying that in a very positive way. I'm smiling. You can see it on the radio.
Yes.
But like it's one of those things that, like, you know, you can watch this at home and it'll be very impactful, but seeing it in a good restoration with a proper mix in a theater is going to be an experience.
The series will continue with Lost Highway on March 15th. Talk about the inclusion of Lost Highway into the series.
You know, Lost Highway is it's probably the one that I've watched the least out of this series, but I'm really excited to revisit it, especially kind of, I mean, one, it's like a time loop story without giving too much away, which is talking about how he was kind of ahead of the curve on a lot of things that have become very of the moment over the last decade or so. Like, I feel like that kind of narrative that plays with nonlinear time has become very normal,
Right.
especially in the age of streaming television. At the time, it was very hard for people to wrap their heads around, and I think kind of made the reception of it a little bit hard. But it's also, you know, it's a story about misogyny in a way, and especially kind of, again, telling a story, you know, using film noir tropes and kind of this misogynist who is grappling with his own reality and his perception of women. I think it's even more relevant today than it was, you know, over 25 years ago.
It's interesting because, I mean, many of his movies, almost all of them, have to do with misogyny and violence against women, which makes it very hard for some women I know to really appreciate David Lynch. That being said, it never, to me, feels glorified. It really always feels like an expose of the dark underbelly of things. And in his personal life, if you talk to or hear from any of the women who ever worked from him, they have nothing but positive things to say. It is something that I also wonder about all the time too. Why continue to tell this kind of same violent story against specifically women so frequently? And yet there is always some semblance of heart that goes into it.
Yeah. Well, it's never glorified.
Yeah.
Is the thing. The thing that makes it palatable. I don't necessarily want to use that word in context of this, but like that violence is always presented in a very factual way. It's never glorified, ever.
Yeah.
And I think that manner of presenting those things happening is incredibly important.
And I think that's the idea, right? That he takes this kind of picture perfect Americana and talks about the darkness that is intrinsically tied to it. Misogyny is a huge part of that. You know, it is a part of this country that we are grappling with in a new way every day. Unfortunately, they're not the fun parts of the movie, right? They're very hard to kind of deal with, but I think that's kind of the point. We have to deal with it.
And we're speaking with Ben Elliott, the creative director of the Triplex Cinema in Great Barrington, who is hosting a David Lynch tribute series called Time to Wake Up. March 29th, they'll be screening Mulholland Drive.
My first entry into his work was Mulholland Drive, which I saw here at the Triplex. I saw it 3 weeks in a row. I kept coming back. It just blew my mind. And, you know, I just went from there and absorbed everything he had done by that point. It's one of those things where it's like nothing in that movie like was an actual like one-to-one with my life. Obviously, like as a teenager in Western Massachusetts, I didn't have, you know, I've never been to Los Angeles by that point, never mind everything else that happens in that movie. But there's something just about that idea that, you know, if you're at a point in your life where you kind of don't feel like you necessarily fit in, or you're trying to figure out, you know, where your place in the world is going to be, and it can sometimes feel like everyone else has it figured out. Seeing a movie where it says, hey, that image of perfection in this country, there is a darkness underneath it. There is a place for weird stuff here. It made me feel seen in a way I kind of had never felt in a movie before. And I think that's kind of the through line through all of his work, right? Because he was this incredibly sweet, energetic man who built these kind of nightmare worlds, but it really makes sense where it's you have to accept the good and the bad at the same time. And I think he was kind of the master of that and finding the beauty in the things that scare us and hopefully making them a little less scary. You were talking about Wild at Heart being such a positive love story. This is a story of heartbreak, and in a way that I think heartbreak is also really hard, to use words to really describe accurately. It touches us in so many different ways. This is a movie about grief and the weird ways that it can kind of mess with your mind.
It was Oscar nominated, although it didn't win for it, and it is a love letter to the city he loves so much of Los Angeles, hence the name Mulholland Drive. And you watch Sunset Boulevard, and you'll see where David Lynch is pulling from for this kind of homage to the city of Los Angeles. The series at the Triplex will continue in this tribute to David Lynch with Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which we touched on a few weeks ago when we talked about the disappointment many Twin Peaks fans had about what they were expecting from this movie. But if you go into it with an open heart and mind, you get to see an incredible Chris Isaac as an actor in this, Kiefer Sutherland. You get to see Gordon Cole, who is David Lynch himself's return in this.
Yep.
She's my mother's sister's girl.
And of course, David Bowie. On screen.
Yes.
Yep.
For 1 hot minute.
1 hot minute.
I'm not going to talk about Judy. In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all. We're going to keep her out of it.
Gordon. I know, Coop.
Yeah, like I was saying the other week, I'm so excited to see this and to give people a chance to kind of re-examine it, and especially I think after what he did with The Return with the sequel series in 2017, it ties directly into that and kind of explains what he was trying to do with this movie. But I love television as well as movies, and kind of trying to tie up a story that means a lot to people is a really hard thing to do. And still, I think, dealing with the finale of Lost in my heart, years later.
It's not your fault that J.J. Abrams does not know how to end a story.
But here's the thing, in all fairness, if you were disappointed with the end of Lost, don't get into the world of David Lynch. It is not about tidying anything up. You can
no, exactly.
You will watch The Return, and you will be disappointed.
It took me years to even begin wrapping my head around the end of Lost Highway.
Yeah. This is work you need time to process. You're going to see it at one point in your life, and then maybe 20 years later, you're like, you know what? I get this now.
Yeah, he's an artist, and these are all images and portrayals and feelings and illusion. And if you go into it like that, it can be some of the most gratifying filmmaking and television you'll see. The series, Ben Elliott, concludes with Blue Velvet,
which might be my favorite Lynch movie.
I wanted to go out on a high note, and I think it's considered one of his best for a very good reason.
But it's also his film that feels most like goodbye.
Huh. Because it was early. I mean, it's 1986. It's pre-Twin Peaks.
But if you think about what happens in this movie, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, looking at the line of movies that you have. You have Wild at Heart, which feels like beginnings, and it's a wild race, and it's new love and it's fury. And then there's Blue Velvet, which also looks at love, but definitely feels like parting.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and definitely, not to give too much away for anyone who hasn't seen it, but it's one of the movies that kind of has an ending in a way that's a lot of these titles would you not give you. It definitely, it says goodbye, and it says a lot about the love between these characters, the darkness that they survived.
Absolutely. Unhinged Dennis Hopper.
Right. You'll never want to drink Heineken again.
Heineken? That's Pabst Blue Ribbon!
I love Blue Velvet now in hindsight, thinking of it as almost a prequel to Twin Peaks, because you've got a young and innocent Kyle MacLachlan who will go on to be the star of Twin Peaks with that same sense of innocence and innocence lost that then kind of sets the tone for what will happen to him as he becomes an FBI agent in further Frost Lynch productions. Anyway, I should probably do a podcast about David Lynch exclusively to help me deal with my grief. But until then, we have this wonderful series at the Triplex Cinema in Great Barrington, which will run all the way through April 26th, concluding with Blue Velvet, but also Eraserhead, starting where it all began on March 1st at the Triplex. Ben Elliott, it's been wonderful chatting and nerding out with you about this director that's meant so much to both Khalees and I and to so many of my friends. I literally have a text thread called One-Eyed Jack's, which is the name of a place in Twin Peaks, where we all share David Lynch and Twin Peaks related memes with each other day in and day out. So, yes, I'm glad that the film-loving community has a place where we can all grieve and celebrate the life of David Lynch together through this series. Can you explain before we go why you called it Time to Wake Up?
So it's a line from Mulholland Drive. His book on transcendental meditation, Catching the Big Fish, was really important to me in college as just kind of as a young writer trying to understand how someone could kind of create stories like him. This idea of really going deeper into your subconscious as a way to realize yourself. And that sense of awakening, of characters kind of discovering who they are, where they are in the world, and that the world might not be what it seemed at first. It was what resonated to me out of his work, and so it felt like the good fit.
Well, I will say farewell to you, Ben Elliott, the creative director of the Triplex Cinema in Great Barrington, in the same way that David Lynch would say it at the end of all of his David Lynch weather reports. Everyone, have a great day.
Oh.
Everyone, have a great day.
Find more information on showtimes and all of the other great films the Triplex brings to the Southern Berkshires at triplex.org.
And you can read more about the Triplex's move to nonprofit status in the New York Times as well.
Ooh, you're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Northeast Solar, offering solar options, energy security, and solutions for the local community. Learn more at northeast-solar.com. The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Ski Sundown in nearby New Hartford, Connecticut, offering bundled lesson packages including rental equipment and lift tickets. Online registration available at skisundown.com. Winter made better.
On the next Fabulous 413, it's almost Women's History Month.
So we're getting a jump start on that with singer-songwriter Sierra Fragale for Live Music Friday before you can catch her at the Back Porch Festival next weekend.
And hear about the new video she just released and the album that will soon be headed our way in the spring.
And with the burgeoning class of women winemakers, Mary and Ben Dare at Dare Bottle Shop and Provisions bring 2 women-led vineyards to the Thunderdome.
I'm Khalees Smith.
I'm Monty Belmonte.
We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.